Greetings, fellow educators. I'm Melissa Garrett, and I'm pleased to be joining you on this Pine Project learning journey. As a National Board Certified teacher with 23 years in the classroom, deepening my understanding of my students, my content, and my strategies to teach with relevance against the changing backdrop of society has become the center of my quest as a lifelong learner. The Pine Project has been a component of my ongoing growth as a white educator, continuously working to understand race, racism, positionality, and promoting positive identity rooted in cultural awareness. Through my years of experiences with students, I've grown to be a proponent of social emotional learning as more than a once-a-week curriculum lesson or a circle and/or morning meeting routine. Social emotional learning at its best becomes a lens through which we design learning opportunities and a guideline by which our classroom communities operate. Inspired by the framework of CASEL, we will be exploring the competencies of relationship skills and responsible decision-making in this final module. Relationship skills are critical for our students to be respectful, responsible members of society. This skill set is where we see the previous competencies of self-awareness, knowing ourselves and our identities and emotions, and social awareness, recognizing the cultures and identities and emotions of others, blend and converge. Relationship skills are necessary to ensure successful interactions and to develop positive connections. According to CASEL, relationship skills include communicating effectively, demonstrating cultural competency, resolving conflicts, collaborative problem solving, showing leadership and support, and standing up for others. I'd like to start by exploring effective communication. It is a skill that encompasses both speaking and listening. It's a bidirectional process where each aspect is equally important in fostering meaningful interactions. Listening to others allows us to fully grasp the perspectives, emotions, and needs of others, creating a foundation for empathy and informed responses. Meanwhile, speaking enables us to articulate our thoughts, advocate for ourselves and others, and influence our environment in positive ways. By valuing both listening and speaking, we cultivate the ability to engage in conversations that are not only respectful, but also transformative. Reflective opportunity 1. Take a moment to reflect on the relationships in your life. You can list names, draw webs, or organize them however you'd like. Think about a few people from different areas of your life and consider what it takes to maintain each relationship. Do you communicate the same way with all of them? How did you connect? Do some relationships have more conflict? Why do some require more or different attention? How might these differences make it challenging for young people to navigate relationships as they develop their social emotional skills? Reflective opportunity 2. Pull out your copy of A Different Pond and reread it if it has been some time since you last reviewed it. When I think about the skill of communicating effectively and of the power of speaking and listening, I think of the immense skill the boy in A Different Pond exhibits in listening to his father. The book invites readers to come along on an intimate shared moment between a father and son during one of their routine outings to catch fish to feed their family. There is a single spread in the book a reader might almost miss. I encourage you to sit with this page and all the pages as quietly as the boy and father sit with each other. In the pre-dawn stillness, the boy acknowledges that his dad shares stories of his past in Vietnam, stories of his lived trauma that has shaped him and influenced him in pieces when and as he is ready to do so. And the boy listens. He somehow knows his role is to hold space and hold his father's stories with patience. This book reflects what we know to be familiar for so many of our young people. They thirst for the time spent with caring adults They long to understand more about themselves by hearing about those they love and are in relationship with. The boy understands that the opportunity to learn about his dad as a young person comes during these wee morning hours, side by side on the edge of the pond, in morsels of story at a time. He shows grace to his father in receiving those stories as they come, and to wait patiently for more, no matter how he thirsts for connection and understanding of what has made his father the man he has become. This book reminds me that teaching social emotional learning skills empowers our students to navigate and develop their communication beyond the school setting. A Different Pond exemplifies how social emotional skills support students' relationships with the adults in their homes and family-like circles. Forging strong relationships with the adults with whom they are in close proximity helps students build confidence and a sense of self-worth, which contributes to students' preparedness for learning.
Melissa reminds me how powerful these books can be in bridging the home and school divide. And I'm remembering an incredible moment I witnessed with A Different Pond in a school setting. One of the first schools the Welcoming Library ever visited was an elementary school which held an annual school-wide country study. Each class chose a country, studied it, and then the PTO led a full school celebration of nations. The head of the PTO that year arranged to have that traveling Welcoming Library visit before and during the country studies. Reading the collections of books herself, the PTO head realized that the country studies in the past had been fairly Eurocentric. She proposed a change. Classrooms should choose a country from a list of countries where town residents had migrated from in the last 50 years. It was transformative. While the list included European countries, it also included previously unrepresented countries from Africa, Asia, and South America. The third grade classroom chose Vietnam and invited a Vietnamese American student's grandfather in as a classroom ambassador. He sat beside the teacher as she read to the class from A Different Pond. By the end of the reading, the grandfather was streaming tears. When the teacher asked him quietly if he was okay, he said, "I feel like I'm home for the very first time." There is so much about relationships and social emotional growth to unpack here. There's what happened for the granddaughter when she saw her grandfather centered and in relationship with her teacher and her whole class, who had so many questions for him. There's the grandfather seeing his granddaughter's cultural story centered in a classroom when he has never, in 40 years in this country, seen his story represented and celebrated in a public space. And there is what must have changed for the classroom teacher who observed all of these relationships in play as she closed this book. This is the interplay between story, SEL, and the diversity of this nation. This is how home is built for us as individuals and families and in our school communities. You and I have the opportunity to make sure our students do not have to wait 40 years to feel at home in a public space, at home in our schools. We have that power. We have the books. Now, I promised earlier in the training that we would revisit a moment from the picture book, The Carpet, and I think this is the time to do it. Throughout the book, the girl exhibits such a healthy and strong relationship with her family and with her home culture, a culture that centers around the family carpet. There's only one spread set outside the home, and it's a jarring one. The author breaks the rhyme scheme, and the illustrator breaks the color palette and perspective to show us how isolated the girl is at school. The text reads, "Though I'm small, I know it's wrong to never fit, never belong." No one has built a relationship with her that makes school part of home for her. When I was in conversation with the author, Dejazad, about this, I told him how uncomfortable the spread made me. He confirmed that it was supposed to make me feel uncomfortable. I then framed a question that blamed the other kids on the playground for not supporting the girls' belonging. That's right, in a moment of distress, I expressed disappointment in kids. Thankfully, Dej called me out on that, and here's his response.
As the story develops, we arrive at a page where our narrator is sitting alone and is not surrounded by her loving family and the safe environment we had up to this point, and she's facing a new environment in which she's not feeling safe anymore. And we see other children playing around and they're behaving normally the way all children do when they feel safe, and they're not doing anything wrong. It's just that the matter of the empathy to understand that she's new to this environment and she might thrive in other situations, but this one is new to her. And that's how our relationships works, to understand each other's challenges and have the empathy to give time and the understanding that is required to have them to also conquer these new environments.
One of the things I'm left thinking about after hearing Dej talk about the playground spread and the carpet is the idea of different spaces being more or less safe for vulnerability, risk-taking, and relationship building. As an educator, this underscores how important it is to be intentional in creating an environment conducive to relationship building. A challenge to building relationships can be the wide range of unknowns involving interacting with others, situations, social expectations, and more. Successful relationships and social interactions depend on trust, vulnerability, and risk-taking. Simply giving someone new a chance may be a sizable risk for our students, depending what their previous relationship experiences may be. When we are deliberate about introducing routines in our classrooms, we make school more predictable for students. When we role play, think aloud, and demonstrate models of communication and problem solving, we provide models and scaffold students with language they can borrow and try on for themselves. The choices we make and design of our classroom environment can intentionally support relationship building. We can cultivate and facilitate opportunities for interaction in our spaces that are predictable, accessible, and well scaffolded. Reflective opportunity 3. Pause to think about predictability and scaffolds in your own educational setting. What moves do you already make that help to reduce the unknowns and ambiguities for students about relationship building and social problem solving? What are some common interactions that you might be able to rehearse more or make more explicit still? Reflective opportunity 4. That spread in the carpet is a single moment on a playground. How could the relationships of all the students on those pages play out over an extended period of time? The interconnectedness of the texts "I'm new here" and "someone new" afford us a unique look into how relationships, especially relationships across differences, are built. Please take time to do the reading and reflective opportunity, and when you return, author Anne Sibley O'Brien will walk us through the formation of cross-group friendships. Read "I'm New Here," followed by its companion book, "Someone New." After reading, open the books side by side. Open to the first spread in each. Go through the two books, spread by spread, so that the pages in "I'm New Here" and "Someone New" complement each other with the alternate perspectives of the long-term students and the new arrival students. Take in the interplay of the relationships between the characters. Who is taking risks, and what risks are they? Who is engaging in collaborative problem solving? What examples are there of leadership and support in their relationships?
Imagine encountering someone you've never met before, someone who seems very different from you. You might wonder, will you be able to communicate? Do you have anything in common? What if you make a mistake? What if the other person responds negatively to you? It's possible you have even heard things that make you nervous about the group or groups the person belongs to. Psychologists call this type of discomfort intergroup anxiety and identify it as the basis of prejudice. In Someone New, Jesse, Jason, and Emma meet a new classmate who seems very different from them. This book was created as a companion for I'm New Here, which introduced newly arrived students Maria, Jin, and Fatima. In Someone New, I chose to return to the same story and look at it from the point of view of the 3 students who were already home. Each of them, for different reasons, has to move through discomfort in order to welcome the new student and make a new friend. As Jesse, Jason, and Emma discover, there are things we can do to reduce intergroup anxiety. In my own life, I've noticed again and again that first response of discomfort shifts when I dare to reach out to make a connection. It can be as simple as a smile, saying, "Hi, my name is Annie," or sharing a seat, a meal, a story. Bit by bit, the barriers between us dissolve and the new person comes into focus. I'm often amazed to discover how much I have in common with someone who is different from me. Research studies have found that people can overcome intergroup anxiety even by imagining a positive connection with someone. When Jesse thinks that Maria might make a good member of the team, when Jason imagines himself as a superhero who can help Jin, and when Emma makes a picture of herself and Fatima together, they are actually creating the possibility of friendships with their new classmates. This is why books depicting children from different backgrounds having fun together are so important. These stories help children imagine good relationships across differences, and studies have shown that they actually shift perceptions and reduce prejudice.
Hearing Anne speak, I realized there was a character missing on the playground in The Carpet. I somehow wanted to borrow Jesse from Anne's book and place him in Dej's book. Why? When Maria asks to play soccer, Jesse first admires her bravery and second answers his teammates' objections to Maria joining by saying, "Let's see what she can do." I want Jesse to see the girl in The Carpet's bravery and invite her onto the team, any team. Together, I'm New Here and Someone New provide a unique gateway to conversation about the role played by both groups of kids in coming together to form new relationships. How do the kids communicate with one another, especially when they have different communication styles and home languages? What obstacles do they encounter, and how do they work together to solve them? How do they show cultural competency or openness to and acceptance of each other's individualities with care and compassion? If you wish to revisit this crucial thinking about cross-group friendships, Anne Sibley O'Brien was reading from her author's note in Someone New. I would also point you to the resources section below for a Reader's Theater script that allows you to weave I'm New Here and Someone New into a single interconnected narrative. Additionally, there is an activity designed by Anne and Kirsten that invites you and your colleagues or you and your students to role play the interplay of welcoming and belonging. After you take a break to read and reflect on My Two Blankets, we'll hear more from Louise Elia Foury, author of Restoring Students' Innate Power. Listen as Louise specifically addresses the significance and complexities of connection and relationship building as one of the 4 pillars of addressing response to trauma. Reflective Opportunity 5. Read the picture book, My Two Blankets. Note in your journal how the 2 characters struggled and overcame communication barriers and intergroup anxiety to build a cross-group friendship.
Why is the element of trust so important in the context of socio-emotional learning? It's a big answer. Let's get into it. First, let's keep in mind that the general goal of self-programming is to help us be able to engage with ourselves and others in healthy, positive ways. And what is a central cornerstone of interrelationships? It's trust, right? Now, let's also keep in mind that students who come from marginalized backgrounds or backgrounds of trauma may also be more challenged to trust others. In fact, research shows that individuals with a history of adversity tend to score lower on a pro-social rating scale, which can make it harder for them to form lasting, healthy relationships. So what's behind all of this? First and foremost, there's trauma brain. Trauma brain or survival brain does not like ambiguity. It is not cool with gray space. Survival brain likes things in black and white. It likes things to be predictable. Relationships, trust giving, back and forth is not predictable. If I give you something out, even something as simple as a hello, how are you? I'm not necessarily sure what I'm going to get back. Will you say hello to me at all? Are you going to ignore me? Will you laugh at me? Will you give me an answer that's hard for me to process and makes my day even heavier? If I continue in this relationship with you, will you exit and leave? Relationship is gray space. Survival brain isn't just going to jump right on into that. Youth who are new to the English language have a double whammy here. Not only might they have a background in trauma and be dealing with survival brain, but they're also learning a new language. They're learning new customs. They're learning how to interact. So trying to be able to participate in pro-social environments can be exceptionally challenging. Friend making is compromised. This is a sticking point because we know that students who have strong, healthy friendships tend to do better later in life too, tend to even have better physical health outcomes. So let's start with peer-to-peer relationships. How do we build those up? First, we can start with small intentional interactions. If you're an educator or librarian and quickly ask your participants to turn and talk, that can present a challenge for a lot of students because what is that? It's gray space, it's ambiguity. We don't necessarily know what we're going to say. So one, if you do that, making sure that you have sentence stems, something appropriate to help. If students are challenged in those quick turn and talks, a better starting point might be to schedule interactions. At 10 o'clock on Tuesday, you're going to meet with this one friend every week and you're going to talk for 10 minutes about this topic. They have time to know when that's coming. They have time to know when the topic is, and they can also have sentence stems to support them in that space. Over time, once they gain confidence and comfort in those interactions, we can start adding more to the schedule or having some quicker, more impromptu turn and talks. For students who are new to the country, we can explicitly teach facial expressions and gestures. This doesn't only support your multilinguals, there are many students who can benefit from a more explicit clarification around that, right? What does that look like? What does that body language mean? And how can we be more open? How can we show that we're active listening? What does that look like and sound like? And from a culturally responsive standpoint, we're talking about that deepest layer of culture, which includes social constructs like individualism versus collectivism. For those who come from collectivist backgrounds, taking some of the competition out of peer engagement and thinking toward more team building, collaborative approaches. Now, what about building relationships with adults? We talked earlier about having that give me five where I can see who those important adults are. In building relationships, one of the things we can work on is the idea of reciprocal behaviors. Reciprocal behaviors are the back and forth energy. I give you something, you give me something. This starts when we're young, right? We give our caregiver a smile, they smile back. There's something that comes back and forth, a give and take. Students, again, are youth who are in a position of survival brain or trauma history, don't like that gray space. So when I give something out, I don't know what's coming back. Building stamina and reciprocal behaviors will become key. This can look so many different ways. I'll often have two students sitting across from each other, rolling a toy car back and forth from one to the other as they're exchanging information. We might do a bouncing ball in a circle where that ball is going to one student and back as we're practicing vocabulary words. We might bake cookies together in an ECE class where everybody's contributing and we're all giving to that process. We're all taking from that process when we eat the cookies. We might create a class TikTok dance together or a playlist. This enables youth to practice being vulnerable in small bites. And as they're able to do that with an adult, we can slowly and steadily build trust. This is a great way to build adult-youth trust, but also a peer-to-peer trust. And of course, anytime we're talking about trust, we have to also talk about routine and predictability. When we have routine and predictability, this creates an element of trust. Trust lends itself to safety. When youth feel safe, they're ready to absorb, they're ready to learn, they're ready to be a part of whatever's going on. Here's the bottom line. Youth who experience strong relationships have better physical and mental health outcomes. They have better pro-social outcomes overall. And trust is the central starting point. The PINE project is uniquely positioned to expand our lens on social emotional learning so that we can nurture bonds of trust. We can enter into courageous conversations. We can seek out better outcomes. We can imagine wilder possibilities that make a space and a place for each of us.
CASEL includes the social emotional skills of showing leadership in groups, seeking and offering support, resisting negative social pressure, and standing up for others as important to relationship building. The relationship between Cartwheel and her new friend in My Two Blankets is one of the many across the Welcoming Library Pine Collection texts that I appreciate more deeply, with additional insight into the meeting space of social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices. Cartwheel and her aunt have come to a country to be safe, but everything is strange. In Louise El-Yafouri's definition, Cartwheel is exhibiting transition shock. Cartwheel says she is under a cold waterfall of strange sounds, a waterfall that makes her feel alone. Louise might say she is, quote, navigating precarious terrain of cultural and linguistic inclusion, unquote. In the state of transition shock or trauma, we learn that friendships, while absolutely crucial, are difficult to invite and build. Into that space steps the unnamed girl who at first envelops Cartwheel into another cold waterfall of English words. But the unnamed girl is an upstander. Recognizing Cartwheel's anxiety with a new language, she brings her paper cutouts of words. If upstander is a new term for you, imagine it as the opposite of bystander. Being an upstander requires that you act in support of another, or do so in a way that does not disrupt their agency. Cartwheel meets her new friend more than halfway with her astounding and hard-won self-management skills. Cartwheel keeps herself safe with the words and sounds of her old blanket, but she allows that blanket to change with new words and experiences until it is as soft as my old blanket. We want our young people to recognize when there is a need for an upstander and to have the confidence in themselves to take action. Remember, in contrast to a bystander who witnesses a social situation or event and does not take action or get involved, an upstander makes an intentional choice to become involved in the situation, usually seeking or offering help for another who may need it. For students, some examples of taking action could include reaching out in friendship, showing strength in numbers or physical proximity, or finding a trustworthy adult if needed. Sometimes upstanders' actions are easy to observe, and at other times they may happen more quietly or discreetly, or even be unnoticed. At times, standing up might also involve being an ally or speaking up about racism or hate speech. Some responses you might offer to students include, I don't find that funny. What you just said is harmful. It's not okay to talk about people like that. That's not a kind thing to say. Rehearsing options of how to address the comments others make that are hurtful, cause discomfort, and/or that they recognize are wrong will increase the likelihood that students will have the confidence to do so when a situation arises. Remind them that while they can speak up about incidents of racism, they should also share these situations with a trustworthy adult for more support. The two girls do not only build strong relationship skills, but the reason the unnamed girl's efforts overcome Cartwheel's transition shock is because of the unnamed girl's responsible decision-making. Sometimes the decision to be an upstander might feel like a natural, obvious, or comfortable choice. And at other times, being an upstander may require a degree of risk itself, or might require some learning, persistence, or discomfort. In My Two Blankets, the unnamed girl is an example of someone who is steadfast in her willingness to kindle her relationship with Cartwheel and in fact, shows through her adaptability and repeated attempts that she is not giving up. To be a leader, to stand up for others, to take action, these are ultimately choices. Ultimately, it was a decision on the part of the unnamed girl from the very beginning to smile and wave, and then to return again and again, to bring paper words and support and company and friendship. The conscious action on her part resulted from her self-awareness, her social awareness, and the next of the CASEL competencies we are going to explore, responsible decision-making. The young people in our classrooms today need opportunities to practice decision-making now and often. They need the chance to practice balancing curiosity and open-mindedness while collecting information that will help them to analyze situations and make responsible, informed decisions. Responsible decision-making involves identifying solutions for personal and social problems, anticipating and evaluating possible consequences and outcomes, using critical thinking skills across settings, and considering one's role in relation to personal, interpersonal, family, and community well-being and impact. Of course, responsible decision-making also depends on the integration of all the CASEL competencies. We can see the need for young people to be well attuned to themselves and their identities, their emotions and how to manage those emotions, and how to have strong social awareness and relationship skills as they make decisions. Let's look closely at some other titles from the Welcoming Library Pine Collection that showcase the integration of these competencies and highlight responsible decision-making that benefits the individual, benefits the family, and benefits the larger community. Reflective Opportunity 6. Read, "My name is Sungol, and when I get older," in preparation for this next section.
Sungol has such a strong self-awareness. You can see how that learning came to him when the wise one reminds the boy that he will always carry a Dinka name, like his ancestors before him, even in America. As a son who survived the death of his father in the war, and as a refugee that had to escape into the night to flee that same war, we know that Sungol has hard-won self-management skills, skills that came at a great cost. His self-awareness, bolstered by self-management, allows Sungol to withstand a torrent of mispronunciation of his proudly inherited Dinka name. He even withstands his mother's suggestion that he could take an American name. The words, "Then Sungol had an idea," turns this text from a boy in transition shock to a boy that can call on his social-emotional strengths to identify a solution to both a personal and social problem. And that solution draws all of his classmates into a word game that opens the door to potential cross-group friendships. Here I remember Anja's story from the self-awareness module. She said, quote, "By the time I was 11, I lived in 3 different cultures. In each culture, I adopted a different variation of my name." May Sungol stand as an example to all of our students that our names should be our choices, to change as our identities change, but that as An shared, we need not change our name or accept mispronunciations that, quote, "conform to societal pressure and prioritize others' comfort over my own." Reflective opportunity. Reflect on the potential consequences Sungol, as an immigrant student, might have faced in speaking up about the mispronunciation of his name. How could these consequences, such as feeling isolated or misunderstood, prevent immigrant and new generation students from exercising personal agency? Consider who else in the classroom, including yourself, could have supported Sungol in addressing this issue. Beyond correctly pronouncing names, what other cultural differences should you learn about to create an environment where our students feel respected and understood without having to correct misunderstandings? How can you, as an educator, foster a classroom that empowers all students?
While Sungol represents an example of positive self-advocacy and agency, we know that our students realistically need ample opportunities to practice slowing down the decision-making process and thinking through possible outcomes and consequences for themselves and others to become skilled decision makers. Naturally, they will sometimes make different decisions than what we might choose for them, which presents us with teachable moments as well. In When I Get Older, Kanan, a young Somali refugee, holds fast to strength or identity he garners from his grandfather's poetry. Still, like any of us, Kanan experiences strong emotions when his identity is verbally assaulted. He lashes out, responding to his classmate with aggression. This may not seem like a model of responsible decision-making, but we can leverage Kanan's action as a powerful point of conversation. There is certainly an open door to revisit the competencies of social awareness and self-management, and there's an opportunity here to reflect on Kanan's decision constructively. Consider stopping the reading mid-page after the punch. Invite students to rewrite or revise the outcome to the verbal assault. What were Kanan's choices? What were the potential consequences of his choices? What was the outcome of the choice he made? What decision might have had a better outcome? Restart the reading after this rewrite and see how Kanan himself quite literally rewrote his outcome by channeling the experience into the lyrics of a song that one day the whole world would sing. Open up YouTube and play Kanan's waving flag for your students, and make sure you turn up the volume. Stories offer a beautiful gift in making social situations feel both close to home and just distant enough at the same time. It can be easier for students to explore characters' social situations and decision-making scenarios more objectively than their own. In this case, talking about Kanan's emotions and choices in responding to the disrespect he experienced can feel less threatening and less risky for students than the lifetime example from the morning's bus ride. By anchoring classroom conversations and shared texts about characters' stories, we equip students with common experiences and knowledge and a bank of possible strategies and options to consider when they are making decisions, especially those rooted in strong emotions. Reflective Opportunity 8. Pause now to read the two texts, Salma the Syrian Chef and Mama's Nightingale. Specifically look for and note examples of where Salma and Saya are 1. Using empathy to identify a problem, 2. Using critical thinking skills, and 3. Engaging with resources or others to help make decisions to support their families.
While Sungol and Kanan made decisions that manifest change for their own well-being, the characters in Salma the Syrian Chef and Mama's Nightingale introduce students to characters who exercise decision-making to promote both self and family well-being. For me, both books acknowledge that our students are affected by family trauma and can play a role in healing the family and healing themselves. Salma's mother is suffering from both transition shock and separation from her husband, who is waiting for his immigration papers. Many of our students will recognize a parent who is depressed or struggling as a single parent to make all the ends meet. I recognize Salma's drive to boost her mother's spirits, and I recognize Salma's tears of frustration when the dish, and thus the envisioned problem solving, did not go as planned. I highly recommend the chapter book series by Danny Ramadan that follows this same family and Salma the Syrian Chef. In these titles, Salma struggles with changing feelings and relationships in such an open way that the whole family grows. Notably, in Salma writes a book, she negotiates her Muslim parents' cultural discomfort with the LGBTQIA+ community when she learns her beloved uncle is in a same-sex marriage. Her caring inquiries into her family's beliefs are a model of relationship building and SEL growth. Mama's Nightingale remind me that our students also have family members in immigration detention, in prison, or separated from them because of addiction or other issues. A guard tells Saya's father that he cannot bring his daughter back to see her incarcerated mother if she does not, quote, behave herself, unquote. Saya's tears and screaming are behaviors appropriate to the anguish she is feeling. Her later ability to write and speak on behalf of herself and her mother to the press and in court shows a self-management mastery of those early emotions and successful decision-making. Who might be empowered by Saya's actions to write out their own emotions for personal or family benefit? I'm Your Neighbor Books has faced criticism about the seriousness of the issues facing the characters in these books. I could counter that children do face serious issues and are looking for models to move through their difficulties. Francie Latour and Emo Yüksel spoke in the social awareness module about the full community healing that comes from experiencing true narratives. One true narrative is that our students can be astonishing supports for their family, even when we wish they did not need to be.
In the two previous books, I see not only two characters working toward personal and family well-being, but also starting to touch on community well-being. Think on how Salma enlists the other refugees in her building, and Saya enlists the press, modeling and broadening the impact of the social-emotional skills to a community-wide sense of empathy, connectivity, and action. In the next example, let's explore the impact of a full family who are making decisions that impact their community. Reflective opportunity 9. Reflect upon the phrase, pay it forward. What is the concept of paying it forward, and what does it look like to do so? Can you recall a time when you showed gratitude for help you received by paying it forward? How does the concept of pay it forward align with decision-making that supports community well-being? Reflective opportunity 10. Read The Little House of Hope before moving on, including the author's note. When you're ready to continue, come back to hear from author Terry Katasus Jennings.
Hi, my name is Terry Katasus Jennings, and I'm delighted to be here sharing my thoughts with you. I'm a Cuban-American writer. My book, The Little House of Hope, is the story of my family when we first came to the United States. I am very honored and humbled that The Little House of Hope is a welcoming library featured book. The Little House of Hope is a story that came to me in a moment of anger. It was anger at a friend who's a realtor. He knew me well. He knew that I was Cuban. But still, he said that he would never rent a place that he owned to immigrants. He said they always lived 4 families in one home, and whenever immigrants moved out, they trashed the house. You can imagine how devastated I was. What lack of knowledge, what lack of empathy. It was bad that he wouldn't rent to immigrants, but it was awful that he was showing that he didn't think that each immigrant is a different human individual. He was actually talking about me and my family. My family had lived with 2 other families in the same home, because if we hadn't, none of us could have made it. I felt compelled to set the record straight. My friend was not alone in the way that he felt about immigrants. His comments and microaggression put forward a false narrative about immigrants. The true story of why families lived together had to be put forward. It was not because they were lazy and didn't want to work. It was not because they didn't care about where they lived. Immigrants leave their home countries for many reasons. They might leave, like my family, because my father was put in jail by the government. Right? He was let out, but that was just dumb luck. Most people were never heard from again after they were taken. What if he was taken again and then we never heard from him? Right? What if this time he disappeared? Many immigrants leave because there's no food at home, because there's violence or the threat of violence. Families emigrate because they're afraid. Who would give up all that they know and love unless life in their home country was so bad that they couldn't live there anymore? I had to let young readers know that. I also had to set the record straight, showing readers immigrant families who had joy, who were happy, who were doing the best they could with what they had. I had to show young readers that immigrants were just like them. They had the same hopes and dreams. They miss their home country, but they're also trying to forge a new life for themselves in this new land. This book is grounded in Cuban culture. It is a culture of love for family. But family in our culture extends to neighbors and friends. The book is grounded in the culture of immigrants. When you leave your home country because life there is untenable for whatever reason, and you come seeking asylum or a new life or safety or freedom, you are thankful beyond words to anyone who extends a helping hand. I remember all those people who could have turned their heads. They could have said, "No, this is mine. I'm not sharing." And instead, they invited us to be part of their family and part of their life. Really, what I hope you can do when you use my book in your classroom is talk about making a culture which is inclusive and giving, just like what I grew up with. Love your neighbor, help your neighbor, extend a helping hand. Sure, I could have grounded this book more in the music and poetry and beauty of my country, of Cuba, but I chose to ground it in the poetry of giving and helping our fellow human beings make it through one day and then make it through the next and the week and the month and the year. It starts with that first step. That is the culture this book is grounded on, the culture of giving, the culture of putting another human being first and looking to others' needs before we look to our own. The family in the Little House of Hope keeps opening their home to other families. Once you understand the value of a helping hand, you can't help but extend that to help others. In all honesty, my family would not have been able to survive if it wasn't for La Casita. We came with $50 to our name, and we were a family of 4. My father had no job, and it took him about 2 months to find one. What could we have done? We didn't know any English. A big part of living a 3-family community was that we all taught each other, right, about the United States. My cousins who were here first helped me navigate American schools. It would have been so much more difficult without the extended family and friends. Sure, we could have gone for government help or help from a church, but there might not have been the love that we got from our family and friends. Of course, the decision that our family made impacted so many lives, how they shared. It gave those who lived in the house a leg up so that they then could go out into the community and become productive and thrive and become helpers in their own right. I think that being in that house, having to share, having to shoulder a portion of the chores, learning from each other, and delighted in being together in this new freedom, right? It was invaluable for me. I learned to make decisions to help others in whatever way that I could. The children that I visit in schools give me hope. When I read The Little House of Hope and talk to them about immigration and why people immigrate, students have an emotional connection. They have an emotional response, right? And in that empathic space, they learn. But what is so much more powerful is to hear students share their own or their parents' immigration stories, right? The students who walk across the border, the students who came from Ukraine or Africa. Sharing our common stories gives us all understanding, and it gives us hope. I hope you find that when you use this book with your students.
It's true that sometimes the so much to do of teaching feels like a lot. There are countless decisions to be made, needs to be met, and the daily to-do list inevitably carries on to do tomorrow. Yet, I wonder if you sometimes have a similar experience as I do that tethers me to the real why within what I do. Sometimes it finds me in the quiet and anticipation as I have my students gathered on the carpet to begin an activity. Sometimes in the hustle of a busy conversation while they collaboratively discuss and create. And at other times too, I find myself caught in a moment of awe that these eyes, hands, hearts I am looking into are those that will shape and lead the future. I become struck by how significant it is to get to be a part of their path to getting there. It is then especially that I want to give my students everything. Everything is so big, and you and I don't have everything. But maybe like the sweet family in the Little House of Hope, maybe as educators, what we do have to give will multiply and feed forward too. We can give the students stories. We can help them understand themselves and others. We can cultivate their relationship building skills. We can empower them with leadership skills and strategies to stand up for others. We can provide them practice, making thoughtful, intentional decisions. We can support them in uncovering who they are, who they want to be, and what role they will play in this great big world. That keeps my heart in the work every single day. Knowing the stories of the Welcoming Library Pine Collection are being shared with young people across the state of Maine and beyond brings me so much hope because of all the potential in the work we are all doing together. Thank you for supporting students in stretching their compassionate and empathetic muscles. Thank you for committing to the work yourself. Thank you for being on this journey.
Diverse books in the classroom libraries are a game changer for the next generation, because without it, how else will be the student know then who they are is enough. The books will uplift them in a positive way. When we open up our children's minds and hearts at an early age to diversity in reading and literacy, they grow up to become adults who treat others equally and who judge people based on isolated experiences or stories. Literacy will help all students shape the views about people who look and act different than them. Reading is so powerful for personal validation and academic engagement. Teachers need to be proactive in engaging students in the reading activity, which can help students to process and absorb the lesson for a positive impact on students' self-concept in the school setting. Most of all, never forget that creating a diverse classroom library for students' growth can make readers of today the leaders of tomorrow.
In the Pine Project's collage of voices, the voices of our speakers and the voices of the books themselves, I hope you've been able to examine your own identity development, discover and negotiate your biases, and experience how immigrant and new generation children's literature plays a role in that work and in the classroom work of SEL. May the learning become the sketch, the outline of a plan to build a classroom and a community where we all belong. Thank you to the Maine Department of Education for the opportunity and the collaboration. Thank you to CASEL for the framework that we built this work on. Thank you to Michelle Amato, Melissa Garrett, and the educators, authors, and other voices on and off screen that contributed to this conversation. You astound me. Before we say goodbye, you will not be surprised to hear I would like to share one more book, Reflective Opportunity 11, and the final one. Please take a break here to read and unpack the suitcase. What lessons from the Pine Project do you see playing out on the pages? In her review of cross-group friendships, Anne Sibley O'Brien shared the concept of intergroup anxiety. It is, according to psychologists, a universal human emotion and one we need to train our brains to mitigate. As a reminder, it is the nervousness in response to the encounter with someone we perceive as different from ourselves. Now, the bird, rabbit, and fox experience intergroup anxiety when they encounter the strange animal. While there's some curiosity, distrust is their primary reaction. I think we can agree that the bird, rabbit, and fox went into this encounter with no cultural competence, no information about their blue neighbors and the conflict that made them leave their homes. If uninterrupted and unresolved, intergroup anxiety can become the foundation for prejudice to develop. M.O. Yüksel might say that intergroup anxiety, combined with a lack of cultural competence, could lead the characters open to false narratives about their blue neighbors, a potent environment for prejudice to develop and to be acted upon. We witness that act of prejudice when the fox smashes the suitcase, and when the rabbit and the bird are not upstanders, but bystanders. So how can we interrupt and resolve intergroup anxiety and consequences like this? It requires meaningful engagement and communication. It requires contact. Decades of research on contact theory has established that if people have opportunities to get to know one another, the sense of strangeness dissolves and the anxiety lessens. Attitudes can shift and the potential for a positive relationship increases. We see this in the book, Someone New. But here is the pertinent piece. This contact can happen indirectly. What is an example of indirect and vicarious contact? Books. If we can read a story about, say, a blue creature who was forced to leave their home due to an environmental, economic, or political crisis, we can gain both cultural competence and empathy, two skills that allow us to make responsible and inclusive decisions. In a 2015 study conducted by psychologist and diverse bookfinder founder Dr. Krista Aronson, she found that when children read books featuring characters of different races or cultures having fun together, they were more likely to pursue cross-cultural friendships in real life. We see this play out with what the animals discover inside the suitcase, the photograph. The photograph not only confirms the immigrant story of a house on a hill, but shows the animal happily waving and inviting the viewer to his table. The photograph told a story that was different from the animal's first observation of him as dusty, tired, sad, and frightened. Without that photograph, would the blue animal's story have been known? Francie Latour reminds us to ask whose voices are missing and what can we do to make things fair by making sure those missing voices are heard. While the change takes place offstage, the story of the blue animal's former life decreases the bird, rabbit, and fox's anxiety, increases their empathy, and allows them to repair what they have broken. They not only repair the teacup, but they go further and rebuild what their blue neighbor has lost, his home. I'm reminded of what Ange Ashimwe said about our negative impact on others. Take accountability, apologize, repair. Is what the animals did enough? It's a beginning. The last line in the book is, we're going to need more teacups. As we leave the Pine Project, let's hold on to that quote. Let's imagine teacups are the tools and actions needed to build a classroom where we repair exclusion and build inclusion. The teacups are our ongoing commitment to discovering and implementing SEL strategies integrated with conversations about identity. Eris Ayala said earlier, as educators, we have the duty to continuously be curious, reflect, and learn. And finally, I return to the words of Andrea Wong. I believe that we need more books that humanize the immigrant experience, not just to counter racism, but to show children from all different backgrounds that they are seen, and they are understood, and they are loved. Thank you. We're going to need more books. We're going to need more teacups. I'm Kirsten Cappy, the Executive Director of I'm Your Neighbor Books. This professional development was created at a particular time with a particular community of voices. Language, terminology, and perspectives constantly evolve and should evolve. At the time you navigate this training, those evolutions may have already taken place on any detail of this professional development. In 1993, Brian Street, academic anthropologist, coined the phrase, "Culture is a verb." It is an ever-flowing and evolving path to remaining curious. While these learning modules are fixed in time, the impact is fluid. The impact is a verb. Because cultural humility means we use the most up-to-date information, but also listen to the voices that came before us. This is an acknowledgement that we have and will make mistakes. We too are evolving. Our mission here is to guide all of us towards the pivotal goal of fostering a more equitable society. Thank you for doing this work with us.